Welcome to Capital Dialogue. I'm Bob Priddy from the Missourinet and Missourinet.com. We're glad to have you with us on this edition of Capital Dialogue. We spend a program every month talking with members of the General Assembly about what's going on in the legislature, or right now we're talking about what went on in the legislature. The session ended in mid-May. There's been a little bit of time for us to decompress and assess exactly what did happen and what didn't happen and where we are now. We've started a whole new fiscal year, and the budget that these members of the legislature we're talking to today worked on has now gone into effect. I want you to meet our guests on our program. We have a member of the House and a member of the Senate. First of all, sitting on my left is Representative Genise Montecillo, who is from St. Louis. She is a Democrat, and she is a member of the House Education Appropriations Committee. On my right is Senator Dan Brown, who is from R-Rolla. He is a member of the Education and the Appropriations Committees in the state Senate. This was another one of those years where we had to count our pennies very carefully. The bills for the budget start over in the House, so we're going to start with you, Representative Montecillo. How hard was it to come up with a budget for education this year?
It was very difficult, although I think we were very committed in the House, both in appropriations and in the Budget Committee, to making education our number one priority, that we knew that we were going to have difficult fiscal times, but we understood the importance of education. So there were difficult cuts to be made, difficult discussions were had. I believe we put forth a very good budget with what we did have. There was good bipartisan cooperation with our budget. I think most of us were quite pleased, and even when we came to the Senate and there was a little bit of disagreement, I think in the end, I think we were very pleased with the final project that we put together and the numbers we put together. Obviously disappointed as a special ed teacher of 25 years. We are, as we were just talking, still significantly $468 million under the foundation formula, so schools are still underfunded. Programs that we felt were significant enough to appropriate for have been withheld by the governor, which is of great concern to, I know, myself and I think many other members of the General Assembly. So it was very difficult, very difficult.
Was it as hard over in the Senate? You saw what they had done in the House. Right. How difficult was it for you to accept either that or make changes?
Well, we did make a few changes in the Senate, both on the higher ed level. When we're talking about education, K through 12 and higher ed, Missouri is lagging behind in funding on both levels. And of course right now it's extremely important to us that our community colleges, technical colleges, colleges that train kids for jobs and jobs of the future, that we fund them to the level that they need to actually get these kids prepared for cutting edge technology, where it's at the high school level in the VOTEX or at the community level. So we did increase and put money back in higher ed. We tried to increase funding K through 12 a bit, but we're grossly underfunded in K through 12. Everyone realizes that.
And the ironic part of that is that when the legislature enacted the most recent school foundation formula, the members at that time, about 8 years ago, recognized that the state wouldn't be able to fully fund it at that point, so they phased it in over 7 years. Well, this is the 7th year, and the phasing in has been crippled. How did that happen?
It's very crippled. We failed to put a fix into place. There were ideas put forth that failed to move forward, and as it happens, DESE ended up taking control of that, I think, in an attempt to minimize the extreme losses and damages to certain districts, which without a fix, I think we did, again, the best that could be done, because I think had they not done that, there were some districts that had quite a bit to lose, and I don't think a lot of those districts could have taken the hit that they hit. We're going to have to come together. We're going to have to separate these issues, and we're going to have to come up with a fix to this foundation formula. We were discussing it. It's way too complicated. It's more complicated than it needs to be. Education in our children is not political, it's not partisan, and we need to put those issues aside, and we need to fix the education problems facing our state, in my opinion.
Is there a fix?
We had a couple of bills filed this year, one in the House and one in the Senate, that varied a little bit to try to address when we're freezing funding at the 2009 level. We're not continued forward with the foundation formula to make this more equitable without going into a lot of detail. Some districts that have been foundation or formula districts would become hold harmless. Some hold harmless would become foundation. It's very, very complicated, and I think as a legislative body, as our As our revenues grow, we're going to have to decide, do we continue growing social programs, or do we step out and say we're going to put X amount of dollars into fully funding the formula?
Let's clarify a couple of terms here, because I'm sure a lot of folks who are watching this program do not understand what a hold harmless district is or what a foundation formula district is. They just assume that the state sends the money to the districts. So what is a hold harmless district, and who are they?
You know, one of my colleagues, one of the reps in my area, is an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Keith Frederick, and he made a statement one time that a total knee replacement was less complicated than the foundation formula in Missouri, and I tend to agree with him because there's so many different, it's a state adequacy target, it's a dollar value modifier, the local effort, all of these are involved in the calculation, and whether or not we fully fund one district, a hold harmless district may be a very poor school district with very little local effort and very little tax base, or it may be a very wealthy district, like in Representative Monticello's area. Some of the districts do very well on their own. So that determines how much money flows from the state to some of these districts.
Well, tell me, when you hold a district harmless, what harm are you protecting it from?
Not being fully funded.
Not being fully funded.
Not being fully funded, not being fully funded. I think it was an attempt to make sure that nobody, that nobody took those hits too hard, too quickly, and to try to balance out those funds. And for me, I think, again, and not to keep going back to the point, but I think we do know that we're underfunded. But I do know that there are other measures as a teacher and the things that we can do to help districts to compensate with such things as the literacy program and urban teaching programs and character education, those types of things. And then when we take those dollars away from them as well, I think that really impacts their ability to really affect student performance. Near and dear to my heart is the early literacy program. It's a program that targets low-performing second grade readers. It's a 12 to 20 week program. At the end of that week, 77% of Missouri students who participate in that program are back on reading and writing. It's about $24 per student, versus when we do adult literacy, when we're talking high school, the GED program, it's over $400. And at that point, we know a lot of those kids are in the juvenile system, and that we have them in there, they're incarcerated. We know that those expenditures just extrapolate. It's a good investment up front. There's a lot of smart things. We could be working smarter than what we are right now to help educate our students. And I think we need to look at individual schools. We were discussing before the program that what might work for my district might not work for the senator's district. We need to meet kids where they are and meet districts where they are, so that we're educating our students, because we're lagging.
There are 500 and how many districts in Missouri?
24.
524 districts, and each of them has its own special needs and its own special programs and its own constituency and its own student body, and the legislature has to come up with a way to properly fund all of these needs in all of these districts. So if you think it's complicated as we sit here and talk about it, you're exactly right, but we're going to take another swing at it when we come back.
I don't miss my car, and I feel safe when I ride this bus. A little over a year ago, I got my car demolished. So I gave up on driving, and I'm their best customer. I go everywhere on that bus 5 days a week. That's just part of my life now. I enjoy the camaraderie. The drivers are really good drivers, and they look after us. I just feel safe when I ride this bus.
To find out how rural public transportation can put more life in your day, just give us a call.
Mayday, mayday. I need help.
Vessel in distress. This is the United States Coast Guard.
There are many thankless jobs out there. This isn't one of them.
We're talking about education on this edition of Capital Dialogue. The legislature has finished its budget year, has finished putting money in the budget for education. Education is the number 2 thing the Constitution requires the legislature to do. First is pay the debts, the bond issues and the like, and second is to fund education. So we're talking a very high priority thing in state government. As we mentioned in the first segment, although there is a school foundation formula for distribution of funds to the 520-some school districts, the legislature hasn't been able to fully fund that for a number of years, and we are several $100 million in the hole. This year, I started hearing members of the legislature talk about redoing the foundation formula, changing it because the legislature hadn't been able to fully fund it for several years. Representative Genise Montecillo of St. Louis, is that an answer, rewriting the foundation formula?
I think it needs to be reworked, and I think most of my colleagues that I've spoken with and individuals that have a vested interest, I think most people agree we need to rework it. Whether it needs to be completely from scratch and start from scratch, I'm not so sure about that, but it is much too complicated. It obviously has not worked. So I think the very easy answer to that is yes, we have to change it, but it has to be redone because what we've got is not working. And I think we have to bring parties together to make sure that we do make that happen and make that happen rather quickly.
Senator Dan Brown of Rolla, do we need to rewrite this thing that is more complicated than knee surgery, as you mentioned in the first segment?
I would like to see it rewritten. However, you know, the 93 formula, about the time everyone had it figured out and realized how it worked, we changed it in 2006. We're kind of getting this formula figured out, so maybe we're overdue a change. However, I think rewriting the formula does not take from the importance and the need to really fund education, you know. And I, for one, I agree with Representative Monticello. We don't always know on the state level what's best for the students. I think we need to give guidelines, but let the local districts really take hold and take the responsibility in education. It's all about the kids. And sometimes we get hung up on formulas and requirements to meet the formula needs. And I think we tend to forget about children. And we need to do what's best to educate those kids. So I think there will be a discussion. I hope it doesn't just revolve around softening the fact that we aren't funding the formula at the level we should be.
Well, are you talking of giving school districts block grants, in effect, rather than trying to say, you use this money for transportation, you use this money for special ed, so on?
That's been talked about a little bit, and I'm not so sure that would work. I think there needs to be a bit of oversight. I don't think we need to micromanage our local school districts. You know, the categoricals, one of the ideas I had when we weren't fully funding the formula, let's give a little bit of a 25% leeway between the categoricals, because my rural school districts, the transportation costs and the cost of diesel fuel has become a big factor and has really hurt my local school districts. And so I would like to see, you know, allow them to slide a little money between summer school. You know, remedial's going to have to be there. We know that. Those kids have got to catch up. But summer school enrichment, if they can use some of that money to help fuel the bus or one of the other categoricals, let's allow schools to do that.
Do you see that as an alternative?
I would agree with that completely. I mean, even looking at some of my local districts, one of them would be the City of St. Louis School. They've got 80% free and reduced lunch, so they've got a much different need than one of my other districts, the Lindbergh district, that they don't have that high of a free and reduced lunch. They have different needs, and we have to approach children differently. And so I think we do need to give them that flexibility to put those dollars and that money where it needs to be. And when you've got homelessness is another big issue. A couple of my districts, transportation in part, because they had to cut their transportation. In some case, when kids are homeless, they're not coming to school. That puts attendance down. That affects their foundation dollars. And then you've got that just sort of snowballing impact on education. And then we all sit back and scratch our head, and why aren't our kids educating and why aren't they succeeding? And I think we need to take harder look at what are the problems. We really need to figure out what's not working and what's fixing, what we need to do to fix it. I always use the analogy, if I've got a leak in my house and I just start replacing things randomly, appliances, it doesn't do me any good. I can spend a lot of money, and maybe it was a small leak in the basement, but I replaced my dishwasher in the tub. I've spent a lot of money and I haven't fixed the problem. And the senator may have a leak too, and so he may say, well, the representative, she fixed her leak this way, I'm going to fix mine this way. We're not fixing problem. We're throwing a lot of money, and we're not necessarily solving the problems that are facing kids. We need to meet kids where they are, and districts have kids at different needs. And until we start doing that, I think we're going to continue to get the same outcomes that people are not satisfied with at this point.
The 1993 formula, as I recall, and that was the one before we had the formula system we're now using. Looked at local support a lot and how it formulated how much money went to each individual district. Some people said that we need to find ways to encourage local people to support their local schools more, because there are some districts that really have very low local support. Right. Is that a factor? Is there a way to factor that in so that you're not still giving some people an advantage?
I think that is a factor, but I will tell you it's one of the number one things that I'm hearing on doors this year, particularly from my seniors, because as property values are dropping and the taxes are going up, they're very concerned. It's not that they don't care about their schools, it's not that they don't want to pay their fair share, but they're seeing these taxes going up, and the answer they're being given, it's because it's going to education. So, while I would agree with that, I think there is that concern, and I think the average, a lot of my constituents would have concern with that because they feel like they're already being taxed about as much as they can handle in that effort, and they need to see some support. They want good schools, but they really are concerned. I've got seniors that are worried about being able to stay in their homes because of the tax. Their homes are paid off, but their tax rates are so high. They're worrying about how long they can stay in their homes. So again, it all goes back to this balance that we have to kind of find a good even ground so that we're meeting everybody's needs.
I've been to Rolla quite often, and I know you have some of the same problems she has in terms of concerns about this.
Our local base in Rolla, where I actually live, has been good to vote tax levies about, I think in the 36 years I've lived in Rolla, I don't think anything that the school's asked for has ever been turned down in an election process. So we have a good parental involvement. We really do fund the school pretty well. But some areas don't do that. And in the new formula, I think the local effort, you're almost penalized for being good stewards in funding the schools. It was a switch from a tax-based need to a student need base is what they did with the formula. And I've got some very small schools in smaller areas in my district that have tremendous parental involvement, and these kids, it's amazing. They're getting a world-class education in the middle of Missouri, and because they've got a great superintendent, they've got great student involvement. Every elementary classroom has a smart board. Every 6th and 7th grader has a laptop computer. Parents paid for that above and beyond because they care about the education of their kids. And you don't find that in every district.
You don't find that. We'll
have more about this and other topics with our education system when we come back.
Has anyone ever said, you're the picture of health? You look healthy and you feel fine. But that may not be the full picture. Colorectal cancer is the #2 cancer killer. It doesn't always cause symptoms, but it can be prevented. Get screened. Make sure you are the picture of health.
To learn about screening in St. Louis, call 314-879-6392. That's 314-879-6392.
All across Missouri, people are making a difference. AmeriCorps, providing resources to meet human needs. Vista, building better communities. Learn and Serve, promoting the service of youth. Senior Corps, sharing wisdom and experience. Make a difference, be a volunteer. This message brought to you by the Missouri Community Service Commission. For more information, visit movolunteers.org or call 877-210-7611.
We're talking education on this edition of Capital Dialogue. That's one of the key issues for the legislature to deal with every year. And we've been talking dollars and cents here, and I'd like to touch on some innovative things, because we know a lot of innovative stuff is being done in our schools. And does the legislature, financially or other ways, do you feel like the legislature is encouraging innovation in our school systems?
I think if we look at what the legislature did with some of the line items and some of the programs, the urban teaching program, the Scholar and I think we have tried to do. I think the problem is that those monies get withheld. I think we are trying to give them resources to do some innovative programs, and we're finding that a lot of those programs are very successful. St. Louis City Schools is doing some great things. Dr. Adams, he has programs where kids, young mothers can bring their children to school, so they're in daycare, so they're teaching them parenting skills. Kids can learn parenting skills, the kids can stay in school. And so I think we have districts that are really trying to meet the needs of their kids. We are going to have to support them in those efforts. They are costly. but they are beneficial and we're seeing good results. I think that we're trying. I think, again, we should not micromanage that, but I think we should give them the flexibility so that they can approach and do those things. Again, the problem that I come back to, and I just can't let go, is the fact that I think as a General Assembly we have tried to do that, and the money keeps being withheld, and that's of concern to me, of great concern to me, because I think these are the things that work. I think this is where our future is with our children and seeing the improvement that we need.
Is that, though, a function of just the basic reading, writing, and arithmetic stuff that we need to be teaching? And if times are tough, we take away the part that goes beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic, the basic stuff.
We have done that because we've seen that we see that our music programs, our art programs are being dropped. But also, I have students that come to me that have very unique needs in their home situation. I have students that had students at my school because they have asthma and they couldn't get to the doctor. I have students that parents are out of work so they're not able to get to school. If anybody thinks that a child's going to come into any classroom and they're worried about mom and dad, or mom and dad not having a job, or if they've spent the night before sleeping in their bathtub because there was shooting going on in their neighborhood, that they're going to be coming into my classroom and their main concern is going to be my history class, I think we're all being very misguided, and we've got to put those resources in place too. I think where we're seeing successes when we make their community-based models, where we are putting health clinics in place where the kids can go and they can get there. We passed legislation this year where we can have asthma medication in school so kids can get their medicine. I think where we, again, across the nation, where we're seeing improvement is where we're looking at models, community models. It's not an isolated school situation. That it has to be a community solution. You know, it does take a village. It really does truly take a village to raise a child.
Representative Montecillo is from St. Louis. You're from outstate, from Rolla, from I suspect a much different school climate.
Right.
Are there similar problems, though, similar social conditions that need to be dealt with?
There are. And Rolla, as a private group, started a backpack program to send food home with kids. We have a lot of different groups that buy coats, buy shoes, buy things that need that teachers can go to and be able to pull some money down if they need to buy a coat for a child. And we try to, as a community, do a good job. Not all schools have that ability. And I think a lot of it goes back to giving the school districts some flexibility on how they use some of their funds. Some of the things we try to do with the urban schools, I think we had a little more flexibility on how they can spend some local dollars. Maybe they could take care of this issue on their own, which I would prefer they do. We put the money in the budget to try to fund some of these programs, but our basic reading, writing, and arithmetic now involves computers, and those basic things that that are still somewhat foreign to some of us. These kids have got this. They do this from age 5, and so it's changed and requires more investment of dollars for some of the technology that they've got to know to be successful.
This year, the legislature slightly expanded the charter school program law. You've had charter schools in St. Louis.
Yes.
Some have had good luck. Some have not performed very well.
Most have not.
But are charter schools a viable alternative, not only in a metropolitan area, but would they be an alternative throughout the state, do you think?
I have great concern with charters because if we look at their performance in the St. Louis City and Kansas City area, most of them, the majority of them, are underperforming their city counterparts. I think that the ones that are being successful, let's look at those. What's working and what's not. Let's expand upon that. For me, I wanted to see the accountability piece put before we expanded. To me, we need to be very careful. We're pinching pennies, and to continue to reinvest in programs that we know for the most part aren't working is foolhardy, in my opinion. When I think that we could be looking at some other options that are helping schools and are helping kids perform. So I think we want to jump to be trendy, and we want to jump to have new ideas, and I don't know that that's always the best way to jump in when it comes to education. Again, we have a few that are performing well. Let's look at those. I embrace those. Let's go in and let's replicate those. But to continue to just say, well, we're not really going to put that accountability piece in place first and see what's working and let's just expand, that concerns me a great deal.
As I understand the law that you folks passed this year, charter schools will be allowed in failing school districts wherever they are in the state of Missouri.
Right.
And we do have some outstate.
Yes.
Do you see charter schools as being a statewide program, any kind of an alternative anytime soon?
I'm all for competition. In other words, if the local school district is not performing, not educating the kids, then whether it's a faith-based organization or whatever, kids have got to be educated. And I think I agree with Representative Montecillo that let's look at the ones that are successful. Let's look at some of the faith-based organizations that are doing a very good job, and kids are doing well on SATs and college entrance exams, and try to bring these schools up to that level, or replace them if need be.
We have a few minutes left in our program. I think a few weeks ago, the Education Department got a waiver on the No Child Left Behind law.
Right.
Is that going to be beneficial from the standpoint of the way you folks deal with elementary and secondary?
I think it will. No Child Left Behind was a great idea, but it was impossible to, sure we'd love to raise to all of these levels, but it was impossible to implement. It was impossible to teach to. In other words, you don't want teachers or classrooms teaching to a guideline. Give them more flexibility than that. So I think it will help us going forward in Missouri by not having that hanging.
I would agree with that, because I think what it forced us to do, we focused more on tests, and we got away from what we were actually teaching students, and I think it put a lot of pressure on, and again, we do want those students to perform, but as a special ed teacher, the idea that my children are going to perform, if I've got an autistic child with a 40 IQ, the idea that he's going to perform with someone in the gifted program with 140, it's an impossibility. So again, it goes back to that meeting kids where they are, and giving schools the ability to function where it's appropriate for all children to be successful. So I think it's good, and my hope is that we've got a good system in place, an evaluation system in place, that we can move forward and it's back to giving school districts flexibility that they need to meet their students' needs.
We have a minute left. How will this change the funding situation next year? Or will it?
I'm not real sure on that yet, I'll be honest with you. I came across I believe it was last week it came out, and I haven't had a really good opportunity. I'm traveling for the holidays, and I haven't had a good chance to look at that. I think that it will allow districts to go back to what was working before, rather than trying to put more focus on just meeting those mandates, and we can really start looking at what's working for kids. We need to track individual student performance and not groups of students, so I think that'll help us do that.
We want to thank our two guests on the program this week, Representative Genise Montecillo from St. Louis and Senator Dan Brown from R-Rolla. Education is a top priority, it's a complicated priority, and it's a very personal, down-home priority. We appreciate them being here to talk about it with us. Join us again next time for Capitol Dialogue.